Hi, welcome to another episode of Event Tech on Tap. I'm here with Phil Maggs. Hey, Phil.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Yeah, all good. It's good to see you.
Yeah, awesome. It's been a while. We were saying it's been Event Tech Live 2022 was when we last caught up, right, at the Excel.
It was, and a lifetime ago in AI years. So, good to see that.
Exactly. And so Nadeem, tell me, what are you up to now? You're at a company called Superside. Just for people who don't know Superside, what is it you do?
So Superside is the world's leading creative as a service company. So that basically means we are extensions of design teams for big enterprises. And the way that it operates is as a service model. So you get a monthly subscription. With that, you get a certain amount of resource. That resource can roll over onto other months. So if you don't need some things in 1 month, you need some things in another month. And the general offer is the full stack of creative and design services. So marketing strategy, brand strategy, brand design, visual identity design, ads, digital ads, social media, but all the way down to presentations and email design and all of the kind of design outputs. That's the offer. I've been here for just over a year. It's a really interesting company, completely remote and very, very fast moving.
Yeah, you've finessed the old background there. It's good.
Yeah, I've done it a few times.
I love it. Yeah, it's a really cool model. So it's a new model in the industry. Obviously, so creativity was there's the retainer model, there's a project model. You can contract people, but this as a service is really cool. So I love it that it's flexible. It gives people the ability to kind of pick and choose what they want on an ad hoc basis. Right, that's interesting. So it's a really interesting company as well because there's a lot of emphasis on AI, right? Especially around your role. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, so I mean, me and you have like weirdly similar skill sets and backgrounds, and we've kind of navigated these waters between new tech and digital and content and things that people find interesting. So I joined to run essentially like the innovation, creative technology side. But I joined like the month before ChatGPT publicly launched. So like joined like October 2022.
Yeah.
And so I was already in this kind of early beta of some AI tools, kind of closed betas of some, public betas of like Midjourney and things like that.
Yeah.
So it was, on my radar and within the kind of previous teams that I was working with, like starting to seed into the conversation, but I didn't join to be the AI guy. Kind of just joined to launch new services and find new territory and new ground. Like, what can we offer that's actually useful outside of traditional design surfaces? But then it just kind of the world changed, pretty rapidly in that time, and I could see the meteor like heading towards the business in a lot of ways. Like, if something can produce infinite things, infinite content, we have to be firstly aware of it and see if it can work. And then start to look at if there is a use case, which there definitely is, but actually assess if there's a use case and integrate it in. And so my strange mix of skills of being like, a distinctly average creative and a distinctly average designer and a distinctly average developer were useful in that time because we could prototype some stuff, see if it worked on customers, and found enough of a use case to go, well, if generative AI can work for artistic mediums, can it work in brand? And so we then just started to explore that and found some useful areas there. Some which were more surprising and good, and some, which we're like, okay, we can't do this yet. And then just started to grow it out, and mainly grow it out by just applying it to customer work. And it was very, very, we tried to get it out from being academic quickly, going like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we can draw pictures? It's like, great. Will people pay for it? Can we do it in the time frame?
Yeah.
What happens if we get feedback? what happens with copyright? What happens with distribution? What happens with resolution? Like all these things that
can you match a certain style?
All of that, all of it, and the general answer is yes, but we can match a certain style, but can I tell you at the beginning of any process that we can definitely do it? No, you have the only way at the moment, because the entire black boxes of just not knowing what's within the models, not knowing what to prompt, not knowing what to train. You just have to do. You have to just do and try, and sometimes you just find territory and area within it. One useful thing, and I will say this, maybe not completely, a bit facetiously, but most brands aren't as unique as they say they are. So that you can find generalizations of things that are useful for brands. So like different kinds of FMCG or luxury or aerospace, they generally have territories between them. There's synergies between those brands anyway. There's not always a huge amount of differentiation that you can kind of say, B2B software as a service company X is hugely different in its visual style to be, to company Y. Like there's normally enough things that are kind of have similarities that you can then start to draw, general trends out and things that are useful, especially in the realms of performance marketing. That is content that has a life cycle of probably like less than 30 days. So you want to be able to make that quickly and get it out there quickly and test it and use it. Do you want to use AI on your Super Bowl commercial? Maybe not yet. Or do you want to use it on your brand, on the billboard that will be on the side of your business for 10 years? Maybe. But something that you use for 10 minutes or is seen for 10 seconds, then that's a really strong use case.
Exactly. And then brands are more than ever playing the attention game, right? So it's about volume, it's about consistency. And so, even as a small company, you've got to keep up with the bigger players who sort of dominate that space, have the big teams, have the established sort of creative pipeline to do that, or a retained agency or whatever. So that's the challenge, right? How do you get to the same level without, with a 1% of their budget, maybe?
Well, I think that is one of the big leveling forces, the democratizing forces of it is, we were talking before, but like things like 3D-esque content, 3D looking content. If you think of what the barrier is for hyper realistic 3D, you've got to have a generally mid-size team, because it's not one 3D designer that does all things. You have someone that will do the geometry and someone that will come and do the texturing, and if it will take movement out of the equation for now, but rendering can take forever, and there's kind of diminishing returns on your equipment, your licenses. They're super, it's a big barrier to entry. You need probably above £5,000 PC if you're going to be doing it. In some ways, you need pretty expensive software to do it.
A decade of experience, let's not forget the people time behind it.
Exactly. I can kit bash scenes in 3D and make them look good enough for things, but I'm not, anywhere near good enough that you would say that you would hire me to do that job. But if you just need for your brand a scene for communication that is going to live in certain areas, and you need it to be the right fidelity, you need it to be the right colors, you need to have the right composition, the right story. Well, suddenly it goes from it takes 6 weeks to do that to it takes 6 minutes to do that. And if you are a company that can't afford that, highly bespoke, highly unique thing, you can get to 80 to 90% of the way, maybe 80% of the way. I'm not going to say I would. 80% is a very solid win at the moment with AI. If you're talking about that versus super high-end creative work, if you can get to 80% of that, 80% sometimes is more than good enough for certain things. It depends on what it's used for. So it is an incredible democratizing force for small, mid-sized businesses, people that do have 1% of the spend. That is an incredible thing.
Yeah. And I think what's really fascinating about the space as well is that, okay, it's been a little bit over a year that ChatGPT came out. We
Hmm.
know Midjourney has been around for a little bit longer. There's some free stuff like Stable Diffusion you can use, which is sort of an open source version of an image generator. There's DALL-E on the image side as well. But if you compare what was done a year ago on any of those platforms to what
Yeah.
you can create now, I mean, month by month, there are not just incremental jumps in quality in the sort of style of content you can create, but huge leaps
Mm.
in quality. So that's what's really
It's
fascinating to me.
really hard for me to like. I try and like look back on archival things that we did a year ago, because you do start to like with anything tech, you get used to it very quickly. Like you just kind of, oh, this is the status quo now, and now it can do these things, and you just like within a week it's already not novel, especially to me. I'm just like, yeah, okay, cool, this is what I can do now.
Yeah,
But
you come to expect it, and it's the new normal.
is that 100%? And so, but those things of, and maybe just to kind of speak to people that aren't as like so deeply kind of invested in this world yet, like those tools of image generation, like you mentioned, Midjourney, Dart, Midjourney. I'll actually put a bit of framing around it in terms of how we see it. So, Midjourney is the lowest. It's not the lowest barrier to entry. Midjourney is the Swiss Army knife. It can do the most styles in the best quality with the least tuning. So you have to be a good prompt engineer, or just know how to prompt. Don't have to use a fancy word around it. You just know how to be able to articulate what you want, and you have to know enough of these kind of a few small parameters of like things that you want to use within it.
And
But
so
it is
just for people who maybe haven't done any prompting, I mean,
yeah.
you literally mean just typing in what you want. You're like, make me a scene which looks like this, has this person or that color or this object, in
Yeah,
natural
correct.
language, in a box,
Yeah, I
and you
mean,
press go.
so there's a direct correlation in my mind between like what successful prompters and people that can get what they want are. And I want to also caveat this is I have noticed, and I think I can really attest to creatives with these tools. In my opinion, certainly outperform non-creative, like people that have some sort of experience, training, education in design, so they know composition and color theory, and they know how to articulate things that they want to feel or evoke. And I can really draw a comparison between people that have either a background in photography, so they understand composition, focal length, lighting, texture, rule of thirds, all of the things that you want in a scene. Like if you can, instead of twisting a knob on a Canon camera, you're just saying those things, or instead of changing the lens, you're saying, I want it to be an f-stop of 1.4. I want it to be 50 millimeters, and I want it to have soft lighting, but I want it to have this, kind of hair light behind this. People that have done those physical things will have a good correlation into writing a prompt with those mechanics within. And the same with
Yeah.
like 3D designers as well. People that have thought in geometry, thought in like, okay, how does this primitive shape turn into something I want it to be? But in essence, you are in natural language. Instead of using a user interface to click this button, click that button, you're saying, I want, well, / imagine rather than I want, but like, / imagine a person of this age wearing these things, looking in this direction, feeling this way, shot on a camera that looks like that is this type of camera with this type of lens on this kind of background with this kind of lighting. And that is, for people that understand that kind of world, it is a reframing of your direction skills, but it's pretty much the same thing. And so if you start to think of, not rather than I want a cat on a pillow, you will get a cat on a pillow, but you won't get what you want most likely. But if you are more evocative, descriptive, deliberate with your language, then you will find areas that will actually be more steerable.
Yeah.
And there is just infinite resources in those areas of people that are just knowledge sharing on how to prompt. And that's one very exciting thing about this world at the moment is, we're working on it very heavily. We may be, I don't know, a couple of months ahead of other people in certain areas, but that we can't be any further ahead than that because it's just such a level playing field. Like, we something will come out, we will learn it, other people will be learning it at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting time. Even it's definitely not too late to start jumping in and trying because
So I feel like what you've just described is the power of a good brief, right? So whether you're briefing a creative agency or a creative or a team to do something and using, sort of descriptive language versus technical language, it's the same difference. You're just telling an AI instead of a human being. So it's the same thing. If you put a great RFP out there, a great brief, you're going to get good responses back. If it's vague and high level, then you're not necessarily going to get what you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that, that actually could probably segue into things like large language models, which is the other side of the equation. Like image generation is, especially in our world, very heavily focused on because you're like, oh, there's this magic box that can now make me a thing. But the biggest leverage for all businesses is within the text space, within large language models. That's where most investment is going into. It's where everyone is paying attention to. It's genuinely the most innovative and novel technology are the GPTs, and they can help you with your brief because I've got ChatGPT omnipresent on my screen always. Or one of my favorite things to do is on the app, if I'm walking, just dictate to it, as in like, these are the things I want to think about. Can you format these for me? And by the time I'm back at my desk, I've got a really cohesive, thought out, provocative list of things that can, it's challenging my thinking on. And the same with briefs is, if a brief is loose, kind of like, we want an ad for our new product next week, please. Great. Feed that into ChatGPT, whether you are the person being briefing or the person being briefed, and then ask it to provoke you. Ask it to ask questions that you maybe haven't thought of. Ask it to build out the territory of audience or of objective, and interrogate it with this little collaborator. And it's a wonderful way of doing it because briefing is the hardest thing in the entire creative industry. No one focused. Maybe people don't. I think it's under focused on, because it's the nexus. It's the absolute heart of what we all need. We need to know what we actually want.
It's the biggest gripe of any creative.
Yes.
So if you're at the coffee machine, that's the one thing people are going to complain about. Like, I got this brief. It was one line. It doesn't have any detail in it. I don't understand what they want. We're just going to have to. I mean, you just know you're going to have to waste time going back and forth to get to a point where you've got what they're looking for. So maybe, I mean, I love the example of how using ChatGPT there almost as a sort of assistant, a sort of organizer. But, maybe client teams, events teams, marketing teams can leverage, DALL-E and ImageGen tools combined with GPT to write the best briefs, because you can create mood imagery through image generation, link it to a beautifully written brief, which is taking all the thoughts which you can't necessarily construct rapidly into a sort of cohesive unit, and then put it on paper, and there you go. It's goldmine for a creative team to then take it to the extra 10-20% to make it commercially viable.
And I would just kind of add to the need for that extra 10, 20, 30, 40%, whatever it will be, is, there's a danger for all of us, is that as the threshold or as the entry point, it's easier to jump in to do these things. It will no doubt mean there'll be more things in the world, more content in the world, more ads, more video, more images, more everything. So the need to differentiate your content through quality or novelty or creativity will go up, because in a sea of sameness, if everyone can do it, then everything will end up looking very similar. So I love that idea of using it to articulate the point better, but not as the point that you're not as the thing, because then you have to take that thing and then take it to a point where it's has self-evident innate value more than just an image and a headline, or an image.
Yeah.
That's fine, but it won't be enough.
And it leaves room for innovation, right? Because if you look at the brick and mortar sort of comparison, go to a furniture store, a high-end furniture store, they're all gonna side by side look nice and look appealing and look interesting from the shop front. But what's beyond that is the quality of the product and the people you're working with, right? The people you're dealing with. So there's not just the sort of layout and the presentation, which is crucial, right? It's also the product and the people. But then in a street where every shop looks the same and it looks beautiful, how do you stand out? Be innovative, be creative, and think different. So there's always going to be a sort of moving goalpost, I think, of what the next good looks like in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably why we both work in these industries, right? Is because there is nothing that will challenge you more than trying to work for demanding clients, which are great, in an evolving market that are always aiming for excellent. That never change. The constant there is it will be changed. It means that what works this year will not guarantee to work next year.
Yeah.
So, and that's fun. That's interesting. I'd rather do that. I'd rather have that challenge than incremental, like small, changes all the time. That's just a bit dull for me.
Yeah. And so one of the common gripes people have with content gen, I suppose, is the style point. They're like, oh, everything I type in, it all sounds the same after a while, and it just doesn't sound like us. So from an image generation perspective, that can feel very true. But just tell me some things about what people can do to avoid that, and what technologies out there. I mean, can we talk about LoRa's? Can we talk about other techniques that can
sure.
change the paradigm a bit there?
So it is the most common gripe, and it's the most unfounded one in a lot of ways, because the way that it's kind of what we touched on before. If you ask generic things, you get generic responses. And let's focus first on language and on images. We'll do both, because ChatGPT to me is a really, really knowledgeable intern. But that intern needs a huge amount of direction. You need to spend. That's that intern's first ever job. They know, they've been to school, they've learned a load of things, but they have no practical ability within the business that you're operating in. So would you just write that intern like one email and say, come back to me next week, and just give that person no time and no coaching and no effort? You would just churn through interns and get bad work all the time. But if you sit down with that intern for like a long period of time and be like, this is what good is, and this is why it's good, and this is why I like it. Can you try and give me something like that? Actually, no. Why you got that wrong was because of that, because of that, because of that. And then you can show them, like, this is what bad is. I do not like this because of this. We never do that. And then you go through that process with it, and then say, can we try again? Can we try and get to this thing? And the fact is, good copywriting is hard. Like, it's really easy to write long, boring copy. It's really hard to get like that Apple, like The Economist or Apple, or like these kind of incredible brands that have nailed the 3 to 9 word headline that is so emotionally evocative but clever, but something that just hooks you, like, oh, man, that combination of words I wouldn't have thought of.
Yeah,
that's difficult for humans. So expecting that from your intern without any help is, I think, a little bit flawed. So that without it having to be technological. So what we've done at Superside is find territories that work and then automate them. So like, the data gathering can be as simple as copying and pasting into a Word file or notes file of things that you like and things that you don't like, and starting to create a picture of why you like it and why you don't like your copywriting, and then start to inject that into a conversation and a prompt within ChatGPT. And then the kind of powerful thing there is at the end of that conversation where you've spent good amount of times and you've really helped it with feedback, you ask it to summarize a new prompt, a new system prompt for itself, to say, like, we've now spent an hour together working. Can you distill this into something that you can read so we can repeat this?
Yeah.
So you spend that time and then just iterate over that over a process of time. And then, it will get to the feeling and the language and the tonality and, the specificity that you want.
Yeah.
To be
but in an efficient way, right? Which is the key. Rather than having to have the hour conversation every time. When you talk about a system prompt, again, for people who don't necessarily do this stuff every day, talking about something it's like a layer between just bog standard ChatGPT and then the responses, where you're training it with your own content, with your own voice, with your own ideas, to then almost like customize GPT to your own needs, right?
Yeah, and that's just, like the GPT builder within GPT. So that, if you have a plus version of ChatGPT, you can get access to the GPT builder. The GPT builder helps you build a little custom version of ChatGPT. The GPT builder itself is just a system prompt with a tiny bit of UI next to it. Like, everything is vanilla GPT-4 plus good prompt engineering as a system prompt above it. Nearly every single, like Jasper or copy.ai, there is all prompt engineering on top of these language models.
Yeah.
So it means that it is entirely, which, it's scary and dangerous if that's what your company is if you're building the entire, if the entirety of your company is just chatbots built off GPT-4, like I would say that's a hard market to differentiate yourself in. But as a marketer or an advertiser or an event organizer, that would be where I would start, is like, treat it like an intern, give it what you like and don't like, spend time with it, ask it to summarize, and ask it for something that it can use.
It's a tool to solve an issue, right? So we use a product called Genie PT, which is essentially tailored chatbots for events, and they can be used before an event to sort of boost registration page conversion rates. They can be used during an event to give people more information, like an information kiosk. And you're right, in itself, it's not a sort of a unique offering, but when you combine that with the bigger picture of the tech around it, the reg pages, the kiosk itself, the on-site experience, that's where you're sort of elevating something and making something bigger than the sum of its parts. So all those tools combined, where you're saving time, you're saving money, you're having a better customer experience, more personalized. And so that's the intangible, that's the value that you're bringing, right?
I fully agree. And so that's what I meant was, like, in and of itself, fine. With natively, interestingly, thoughtfully integrated into an entire stack of experience, it's a superpower. And, I like, if I was putting my event hat on in terms of like what I would want, I'd probably want things over like WhatsApp or SMS with that same thing,
Yeah.
Where am I on site where I can't even remember what thing I'm meant to be going to, like having someone I could WhatsApp that would know where the next thing, like, those sorts of things. And it's all the same tech stack in a lot of ways. And if you have spent that time of tuning that chatbot or that helper or that assistant to be genuinely helpful, and it's I would say it's getting to that. I think it's pretty much at that stage now. There are things where you have to be, if it was within like a kind of mission critical services, I'd have redundancy if I was in healthcare or if I was running a nuclear factory or something.
Yeah, if you're an air traffic controller, you don't want the pilots having to chat to a chatbot to guide them in.
Indeed. But the customers asking how long the flight's delayed. Yeah. Yes.
Absolutely. And so this is the way we frame it. It's like, okay, 50% of that, just the comms, which is like, where do we park? Where do we go? What do I wear? Like, where can I get coffee? All that stuff, that noise, which event managers inevitably have to deal with. and respond and be nice and be rapid and responsive, which takes a huge amount of time in the lead up to an event and during.
Yeah.
That then is dealt with, and then you can focus on the 50% of the conversations where you can add more effort into the responses, where you can't just respond with a chatbot, which is more product focused or more, creating a solution for people or offering tailored support. That's where the value
I
is.
think that tailoring is the fascinating area, which is two things which I would find interesting would be being able to ask in the way that you want to ask a question and understanding your intent, which, up until these things, GPT 3.5 being generally available, intent in conversation was like that was what people's jobs were, was to try and ascertain intent. Now you don't really need to ascertain intent. You just need to have knowledge bases that can help someone. So that's just interesting anyway. It's far less effort to get to that fidelity of quality, but also just discoverability. So when I'm at big events, it's sensory overload. It's like, there's so many things going on all the time. I'm tired. My feet hurt. Got to network. I'm here for 48 hours. So I have to make it work and all these different things. And I probably just don't know, even on the agenda, what's really worth it for me. Like, I know that there's stuff going on. So just, even that through conversation going, I really want to find out what's going on in these topics. Can you help me in those areas? Like, that's so much more valuable than an agenda that is like linear.
Yeah. So I had this exact conversation. We were talking with one of the head of innovation, I think, for South by Southwest. So huge festival over multiple days, and there's thousands and thousands of sessions. So you rock up to the city, you're like, what do I do? I want to do all these things, but I can only do one at a time. Here's me. Where should I go? Craft me a journey around South by, which is going to maximize the value, so I don't feel like I'm missing out.
Yeah. So that, I would say those things are entirely, the possibilities are entirely there now. So that I find the language side of things, or just the integration of large language models into, like, not just write me a blog post. I find that really dull. Like, is in like how you can genuinely help people.
Yeah,
we're doing it just quickly on prompting. So coming on to image prompting. Image prompting is hard to get it right, and we've got some people that are exceptionally good at it. But we've got Superside has, I don't know what the current count is, but roughly 300 designers and creatives working at any one time. Now, there's going to be a mixture of both seniority, English as a first language, just their ability to be able to prompt. Like, not saying that people can't. There's not a level playing field in terms of design, because nearly everyone's exceptionally talented in that area. But prompting is a net new skill, and some people have more natural ability at it. So how do I take what's in their head and what they've got, what they're good at, and give it to someone that is maybe this is their second year in the job and they just don't know how to do it as well?
Yeah.
So that's a way we're using language models, is to aggregate people's good work and then help people that are struggling a little bit. So it's just saying, like, prompt recommendations, or where to start, or like, this is what has worked before.
Yeah.
Would you like to try that? And then with images, the challenges with images is that we've just discussed language, and we've discussed it within the frame of the English language. When, to me, I would say, the visual language of Picasso versus the visual language of an Unreal Engine game, they are like French and English and Korean in a lot of ways.
Picture speaks 1,000 words. How do you quantify that, right?
So it is rewiring your brain slightly to think of something which you feel so naturally, intuitively aware of, and then to rationalize that back into language. It's kind of like the same as that why eyewitness accounts at a crime are unreliable. Is if you ask someone to describe from memory what they've seen, like, they probably will give you a really fuzzy description.
Yeah.
And so with images, what we've just tried to do is break things down into components. One is, what are you actually trying to make? Is it photography? Is it illustration? What kind of illustration? Basically try and be as specific in those areas. And then there isn't one tool that will do all of those things. So Midjourney, for example, very, very good with photographic styles, like the best at photographic styles, the best at people. And that was what we've kind of just touched on before, of using good prompt engineering. But the secret sauce with most of that with Midjourney is feeding it an image as an image prompt as well, especially when you're working with brands. So say if you have Red Bull have a very distinct palette, style, photography style. Show Midjourney that. Use the describe function in Midjourney. Ask it what it thinks it is, and then inject that into the prompt as well. So you can add an image into the prompt, plus a description, plus what you want. And that process is iterative. You just have to go through that early 45 minutes of a project going, let's try this, let's try that. And then when you get to a mechanic, the thing that I just recommend to designers starting out in those areas, when you get to a mechanic, really then spend some time figuring out why it worked, because you probably don't know. You probably have just gone, oh, this weird combination of words plus this thing has somehow worked. So then go back to that. Same with GPT, or take that to ChatGPT and say, I've just used these 3 prompts. Prompt 1 worked and prompt 2 didn't work and prompt 3 worked. Can you run a sentiment analysis on these words for me, please? To see what these words... Can you give me some similes of these words?
Yeah.
Because these words worked. And then just, but that's none of this is to do with design, and none of this is to do with creative. This is to do, in a lot of ways, of like data analysis, as in like, this text data has worked. Let's find out why it's worked, and let's store it somewhere so we can then use it again. And it's the same that's the kind of Midjourney prompting mechanic. And then so
we're getting to the point where these image models and LLMs are building a sense of taste, inspired by people. Like where does the line blur?
Well, like with anything, we are the product as well, same as all social things. Like, it's learning from us as much as we're learning from it. So the reason that I would say Midjourney is accelerated is that there's a hyper invested community working with it a lot. Yeah. And it's, you get a lot of net benefit from that.
The technology side as well, you can't overlook, I mean, I was pretty shocked actually when I looked at the latest version of DALL-E, which is OpenAI's image generation model. And DALL-E 3 comes out. In the previous versions, if you did anything where you're prompting it to actually put text in an image, or for events people, design me an exhibition stand, for example, it would really fudge it. The text would be all garbled. It wouldn't be real alphabetical letters. It would just be a bit sort of mishmashed, and the exhibition spaces were sometimes a bit flat. Didn't really make sense. The geometrically wasn't buildable, right? DALL-E 3, now you can actually prompt it, and it will do a design which is easily something you'd have gotten off Fiverr. 100%. Like the fonts are there, the language is there, the text is there, it's putting extra elements in, it's designed nicely. Then from the exhibition span perspective, try it. I mean, you can generate believable designs. If you'd seen them in a pitch deck, you wouldn't question it.
I fully agree. DALL-E has got a very interesting mechanic, which I still wouldn't use it for ultra photorealistic things in the same way, but like Pixar style characters or text, anything more illustrative, character based, it's super strong. And one of the most interesting things with that is that you can kind of go back into the latent space of where it's making these images and have a conversation with the image. So you can speak to DALL-E through ChatGPT and say, I like that, but can that person wear a hat? Yeah. For example. And it will most of the time keep the character relatively consistent, but put a hat on the character. Yeah. Not always. Like, this is the thing. Keep your expectations, tempered with this. But you just even think about that. Like you can't do that with Midjourney. Midjourney, you do have to re-roll, rewrite, redo. You can do variations, but you can't speak to the image in the same way that you can in ChatGPT. And so there's just an interesting.
But then behind the scenes, what's going on there? So take an open source model like Stable Diffusion, and that's where you can start to really dig in and really sort of get to a higher level in terms of control.
Yes.
Because to sort of talk about LoRa's a little bit, because I think it's a really cool concept. And if from a layman's perspective, a LoRa is basically like a training set of images to use, which you can, I guess, use a bit like a system prompt into an image gen model.
So there's different kinds of LoRa's, and the reason that it's the more advanced area is so let's go back into like just the first things. Stable Diffusion. There are different base foundational models of Stable Diffusion. So SDXL is the kind of most ubiquitous one now, but there are consistently either like people that have done more lightweight versions of SDXL or slightly updated versions of it. But like let's take SDXL as the base image generation model that you can open source use. A LoRa, or low rank adaptation, on top of that is the final 0.1% of what, not even that, mathematically not that, but like it's the cherry on top of the cake. The SDXL is the entire cake, and then it's the icing, but it's the cherry that you can put on top. A little bit of the decoration and the cherry that you can put on top. To semi fine-tune. Fine-tune's the wrong word, but like to steer it to be more of what you want in terms of style. So style is a very broad term anyway, but it could be illustrative style, color space, texture,
composition.
These kind of composition. Yeah. Well, composition can also be another. So you can stack LoRa's. So you can have something that is trying to do style transfer, which you can say, all right, here's an outline of what I want. Now transfer this style, and this style could be. Let's just take generic styles to make it easy, like an anime style or a manga style or a 3D style, whatever. You can transfer the style onto the composition, or you can train LoRa's that have ideas of composition, as in like our composition is always like this. Let's have this style and this composition. The way why it's super powerful is your training set. I mean, it could be 20, but like roughly 50 to 100 images that are well curated, compositionally similar or stylistically similar. Just so actually one note on that, that's actually harder than you think, especially if you're taking human, like we've taken some of our illustrators and tried to do LoRa's with their styles on one brand, and you're like, actually, this illustrator and this illustrator really do approach it in different ways, even though they're on brand, but their stroke weight is different and their texturing is different, and their color, so that you actually, so it really makes you drill into like what is similar. But having a group of like 50 to 100 images which are similar enough to do style transfer or similar enough for composition, that you then tag and then say, so it's an image tag pair. So you say like, here's an image and this is what's in it. And you tag it with some information that's in it. And then you do the LoRa training process, which is just a very small piece of machine learning and training, where you do a little bit of rendering of that additional LoRa. The challenge technically with integrating this into brand is two things. Firstly, why do you want to do it? Because you should only want to do this when you want to do something repeatable, because that process in and of itself takes a bit of time. But if you do want to do something repeatable, it's a great thing to do. Secondly, outside of Midjourney, you don't have to do that work. With LoRa's, you've got to choose the base model. Then you've got to do the fine tuning and how many steps with that fine tuning of that, do that machine learning. And then you've got to do the prompt engineering on top, and you've got to choose the parameters. So that your variables of why you may not get something that you like out of it go higher. So it's just a bigger time investment, but then it has this incredible return on that time. Because if you want to do 10,000 of something, absolutely. If you want to do 10, by the time you would have done all of that, look, the kind of the gathering good data, cleaning that data, tagging that data, training that model,
Yeah.
integrating that model, prompting that model for inference, I would argue there's not great returns on that, but it depends on what you're looking for. Like the process in and of itself is fascinating, and I think it's the future. Personally, I think it's the future.
So to give you a use case, though, you think about a brand who's trying to reach a global audience, maybe, or who's trying to go beyond just their sort of geography. If you have a base style or an ad or a set of ads that you want to then sort of personalize on a scale that you could really never have done before, because it would have taken designers, days and days and days and months and months and months to create all these different versions and to carry out that versioning process. That's where using something like Allura, if you can have something repeatable, you could really tweak an ad so that the people change from place to place, they match the people you're targeting, and you can personalize it to like the nth degree, to almost to the individual, right? And
Yeah,
that's
I mean, so we are trialing and like this kind of models as a service thing because we're trying to take the technicality of doing it and make it available for people because it will it will be more available for people. We're trialing it out. I think localization of content, big global teams that want to have cohesiveness and consistency. It's the same as a digital asset management system or a CMS. Allura is, on top of a base foundational model, most likely is the next version of a CMS in a lot of ways. Is in like, why have a CMS? Well, of a dam. Like, why have a digital asset management system when you can just have something that will make you assets that you want?
yeah, this is
If you
it.
know
You
what I mean.
almost
Like they're
almost like physicalize the brand guidelines of a style guide into a tool. You can say, make me another. Like
yes,
moving beyond stock image libraries, which have dominated our lives for
yeah,
a couple of decades now. This is the new
yeah.
stock image library of the future.
I think so, and I would say that we're on the cusp. Like, is that ubiquity? Not currently.
Hmm.
It's maybe not in our world, but we are on the edge of it.
Yeah.
We have found the use case, and we're building the data pipelines mainly. Is in like we know this data will be super useful, and again, I think probably the thing I'll like finish off with is for brands, for marketers, for companies, anyone, your unique data is the only differentiator here. If everyone's got all of the tools and if everyone eventually will be able to use them, the only thing that's not public, the only thing that's valuable is your specific non-public data, anything that you can use and no one else can use. And that is the secret sauce there is like, if you are a company that is historically got 50 years, like aviation companies or something like that, they've got just like decades of data, decades of design, decades of that is inherently not public. That is a very interesting proposition for what you can do with that, with creativity on top of it. And I think that's, where I would implore people to focus is like the shiny tools are great. They are super cool and I love them. The data is the value, and I think it will continue. It's the inherent value that will have longevity. Is if you focus on those things, the endpoints will change, the tools will change, the tech will change. We could do this time next year, and Midjourney could be sued out of existence, and there'll be something else coming. Who knows?
Well, the
But
cat's out of the bag now. It's pretty hard to put a stop to it because it's all open source as well. That's the interesting thing.
agreed. Yeah.
It's really interesting. I'm with you. It's a real game changer, and it's a real tool to. I think we talked about this earlier, to democratize access, to democratize doing stuff at scale with a smaller team, to get smaller businesses on the same level playing field as the big giants out there. With a fraction of a spend, and that's where it's really exciting. And to inspire creative teams to deliver really amazing work on target, on brand. There's so many powerful sort of use cases for it.
We've spoken a lot about things that don't move. man, this is the year of things that move.
Runway.
Pika, like they are at the moment, it's still a little bit of a slot machine, and it's still a little bit of a party trick in some areas. And there's still challenges around resolution. There's still like things about the controllability enough that you'd want. For example, I can take a character made in DALL-E and I can vectorize it, and then I can control that part of it. Getting a fully baked MP4 video from Runway is that controllable enough in a professional workflow that I'd want? I can't regrade it. I can't, some of these things. But
yeah,
it's getting to the point, man, where it's getting really, really interesting.
I think this is it, and the overlying sort of point is that this stuff isn't that it might be happening. It's going to happen, whether it's 6 months from now or a year from now, maybe 2 years from now. You will get to a point where everyone has the new sort of creative suite of the future, which is entirely powered by AI. Which you can build on top of, and all of these niggly bits we're pointing out, like transferring from one to another, like the fine-tuning of the prompting, the style matching, all that will be under the hood, and it's going to be a new way of working.
Fully agree. I mean, we could speak for hours on this. 3D, 3D experiences, game experiences, like it will all come to it. It was forever. Like 5 years away, and 5 years in tech always means I don't know. Like when someone says, when's this going to happen? And now you've just said it. Is it 6 months, 1 year, or 2 years? That means it's like over the horizon, and we are now just starting to like figure these things out. But the technology is at a point of maturity, where we could say with certainty, you have to focus in these areas, and if you don't, I'm not saying you get. There's people who have a danger of being left behind in certain areas if you don't focus, if you pretend it doesn't exist. It certainly exists. And is certain things painful? Definitely. And is it more enjoyable than putting pen to paper and drawing something? No. But it definitely exists.
Yeah, you're empowering yourself. I mean, it's not a replacement, it's an assistant. As you said, there's the idiot savant in the corner who you can ask questions all day and it will generate, but it's an extension that helps people. It doesn't replace the people, right? You still got that human element, and that will always be and why would you want to replace the people in the process? Like that's the thing. The worlds that we operate in, brand, creativity, experiential, they're generally to evoke emotion, to provide experience, to elevate feelings. That it still all centers around the human at the end of it. Yeah,
I love the ideas of AI plus events and experiences, mainly because you could never physically replace fully replace bringing people together both virtually and physically. I'm not saying like it has to be you have to be physically in the same room, like we're not, to connect, but you still want to be. There has to be a human on the other side of it for me to make it worthwhile doing.
Yeah.
So like things that empower those, empower people coming together for whatever reason. All the tech in the world is awesome because it's still the same end goal, right?
Yeah.
Is in that you have made connection. So yeah, I think it's, that's why there's, I think a really interesting sweet spot there, because AI for more emails, and then AI that pumps out emails, and then AI that reads your emails. You're like, well, hold on a second, we've just created a machine that this is just talking to each other. But AI plus events to make sure you can get to the thing that you want to get to better.
Yeah,
that's super cool.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good stopping point. Thank you so much for the conversation. I think it's been super interesting. I think we'll definitely put some examples of all this stuff over the top of the recording as we go through, so people can sort of see it in action. But yeah, awesome. Really appreciate the time, Phil. Have a great day.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Nick. Good to see you.